Someone asked me recently if I would be willing to make a video talking more about how I actually sell and distribute trees through the nursery. If you're watching this, you know who you are, and I'm actually really glad that you asked this question. It's a great idea for a video that I had not thought about. I think it'll be probably useful or informative information for some of you. And I'm also curious to hear feedback from those of you that are doing similar work. What has worked for you? And then, trying to be fully transparent, this year, so the end of 2023, the start of 2024, this has been my first season of actually distributing trees as a nursery. I have a nursery license. I'm, allowed, whatever the heck that means, to sell trees. So prior to this, I was only growing trees for myself or to give away in small numbers to friends, community members, donations, things like that. So because this was a big change for me this year, I feel like I learned a lot. I tried a lot of different things to try to distribute these trees, and that's what this video is about, is sharing what worked and what didn't work for me throughout that whole process. So there's kind of three main ways that I distributed trees, and we'll dive into the details on each one. One is I do have an online website, and through that website I offer shipping on trees, so I can ship bare root trees in the dormant season. I can't ship to every single state. There's different ordinances about what trees can go to what states, but for the most part, most of the eastern U.S. and the Midwest, I can ship trees to online. Okay, then I've also done some local sales, and I would say I generated most of my local sales through things like Facebook Marketplace, and like I said, we'll dive into the details in each one of these methods, but local sales is another thing where people either drive out to my nursery, or sometimes I meet people in town with trees, at the parking lot for the grocery store, things like that, and do local tree distribution. The third way is through donations, which is also local for the most part. But through networking, through Google searching, whatever, just trying to find out who is doing work planting trees, I found several organizations that I can donate trees to, and they make sure that they get homes either in people's yards or in conservation projects, that sort of thing. If you're like me and you're just getting started, I think that the easiest thing to do is just to get on Facebook Marketplace and make a posting for what you have. Just try to, be honest and upfront about it and see what the response is. I established my website around the same time that I started posting trees on Facebook Marketplace, so I did them both at the same time, but I think posting on an online forum like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or something like that, it's free, it's easy to do, and it's a good way to just test the water before you spend the time and money to go and build a website. If you're really interested in building a website, if it's something you want to do, I say go for it. It's definitely been helpful for me, but I know it's a big task to undertake, and I don't want folks to feel overwhelmed that you have to have a website to sell trees. Now, I am benefited by the fact that I live near a very large metropolitan area. I'm kind of out in the sticks where the nursery is, but within 30-40 minutes, I'm in downtown Durham, which is a pretty large city. And Raleigh is not far away. There's also Chapel Hill, and there's a lot of other small towns nearby. So there's a lot of people in this region, which means a lot of people to potentially want these trees. I don't know if I would be as successful using Facebook Marketplace in a more rural environment, although the flip side is that in a rural environment, more of the population out there is probably going to be interested in trees than an urban environment where people don't have as much access to open space and yards. So I haven't tried this in a rural area, but I just wanted to mention that I am around a lot of people. Another trick I've noticed with these online forums like Marketplace, Craigslist, whatever, is that I sell a lot of different species, and I wound up getting more engagement when I broke up my postings to have an individual posting for each individual species or group of species. So I have a posting for oaks, I have a posting for maples, I have a posting for walnuts, posting for hazelnuts. When I first started, I just had one posting that was, native trees, and that did not get as much traffic as when I broke it all up separately. I think people are looking for specific things often, and so if you have it easily identifiable on your posting, it just makes it more convenient for folks to click and get what they want. You can also take advantage of Facebook groups. So, for example, there's a black walnut growers Facebook group. There's probably an oak Facebook group. There's a persimmon Facebook group. There's probably multiple persimmon Facebook groups. You get the gist. For each type of tree that you may be trying to distribute, there's probably a group of people on Facebook that are just dedicated to that type of tree. If you join those groups, and make sure you follow the rules, different groups have different rules about what you can and can't post, but usually you can get on there and say, hey, I've got a certain amount of seedlings or seeds or cutting of this specific variety, and you can put on there if you're giving them away or if you're trying to charge, whatever you're trying to charge for them. And I've had pretty good luck getting connected with people who want the trees through those groups. And that is a way where, some of those people might be local, but you can also just through messaging people, you can set up shipping that way. You don't have to have a website to ship people trees. If you're just doing this as a hobby, I definitely don't think that you need a website. You can just use these online forums. The other thing is, if you're just doing this as a hobby, I don't think there's any reason to have a nursery license. They're not hard to obtain. It costs like $100, $150, and it's a state license. The state just comes out and checks your site once a year to make sure you're not doing anything crazy that you're not supposed to be doing. They're basically just looking for invasive plants and really, really bad contagious diseases that trees can have. The inspection process is not anything intimidating at all. It's very easy. The inspectors are not there to fine you. They're really there to help you navigate what being a nursery means. If you do want to go the next step and have a website, at that point, it's starting to become less of a hobby and more of like an actual side project or a full-on, full-time thing. At that point, it's probably wise to get a nursery license. I would not consider myself a qualified consultant to tell you exactly what the threshold is for when you should and should not have a license, but I think if you're going to have a website, probably at that point it's something you ought to consider. Like I said, the licensing process is pretty easy. But for building my website, basically my thought process was I buy some trees and some seed online. I just kind of perused around the places I like to shop at, and just you can see on the websites, typically if you scroll to the bottom, it'll say powered by XYZ. And you can figure out what platform the website's running on. So some of the places I really like to shop at are powered by Shopify. So I just decided I'm going to build my website on Shopify, but there's tons of different online resources for building a website. There is typically a fee associated to keep the website up and running. That fee will also cover, purchasing the domain name for your website. And oftentimes if it's an online store, that hopefully that fee is also covering, services that you need, such as being able to accept online payments and set up shipping and track orders and this sort of stuff. So Shopify does that for me. It's a pretty good program. Like I said, there's definitely others out there. I'm not an expert on any of them, but I'm using Shopify, and there was definitely a learning curve, but between watching some YouTube videos and just fiddling around with it, I was able to figure it out. I should note that I am reasonably computer savvy. I'm definitely not a computer whiz, but I'm pretty comfortable on a computer, so it wasn't that hard for me to figure out. I know some folks' computer work can be really intimidating, and so if that is you, I would recommend getting some help from a friend or someone in the local community that maybe knows a little bit about website building, computer work, and can kind of just make that process less painful for you. Having a website is great. It's a really awesome way to distribute your trees, but one of the more difficult things about having a website is generating traffic to the website, and that's something that I'm definitely still learning about. You can pay different ways to have advertisements online. That's something I have not really done much of. I'm trying to do most of my advertising for free, but that's certainly an avenue you can explore. This is one thing where social media kind of helps. I'm on social media. I really enjoy being on here and the process of articulating and sharing what I'm working on and why I'm doing things and the engagement with other people with similar interests. But it's also convenient in that, having a following on social media can generate more traffic to my website. I can make a post when I'm offering certain things, and a certain number of people are going to see that post who may or may not be interested in the trees or the seeds or whatever it is that I'm offering. That can just help generate some traffic to the website for sure. Again, I don't think that any of these are must-haves. I don't think that to have a successful website means that you must have a social media. But if you feel inclined towards making a social media anyway, I think it's worth exploring, right? Like, I wouldn't make a social media just to promote my website, because then it might feel like a chore. But if it's something you have any level of interest in, it could serve other needs, it's probably a good idea to explore it, see how it feels. When it comes to donating trees, you can try to look around online or just, in your community and just what are the groups, what are the conservation projects that are going on, who are the groups involved. Once you find any one person or group involved in that stuff, you can ask them, who else do you know in this region who's doing similar work? And just start reaching out to folks. Most large cities will have tree planting programs. You can contact them and see if they accept donated trees or if they know anybody who's working on that sort of thing. I've seen people in urban environments have the same concept of a free little library in front of someone's house with, a little stand for books. You can have a free native plant stand if you live on a highly trafficked, street, just have some trees out there with the signs as free native plants. That's a good way to give away a small amount of native plants to your neighbors and people in your community. Another good thing to do can be look for tree giveaways. A lot of the organizations that I donate trees to, and really I don't donate trees to that many organizations. There's 2 or 3 that I mostly go to. But most of them are involved in tree giveaways. So they'll do giveaways to usually homeowners. These are smaller giveaways. But these giveaway events are broadly advertised on all social media, on the internet, flyers. And so they're an easy thing to find out about and then get connected with the groups who are doing the work. And then this leads into another thing that I think is important to talk about, which is what trees are in demand. What we're trying to do here, or what I'm trying to do, is find the intersection of what is in demand by people around me, both in my local community and the wider community of the East Coast, the Midwest. And where's the intersection of that demand with my interests? I don't want to grow a tree that I have no interest in growing just because there's demand for it. I want to grow a tree that I want to grow, but hopefully there is demand for it. And so trying to find that intersection. When it comes to donating trees, you can ask, what are they looking for? They may not be looking for exactly what you're growing. I've found that a lot of the groups that I donate to, because they're donating a lot of trees to people in cities and urban environments, they're looking for smaller trees and oftentimes shrubs. They want small trees like redbud, dogwood, smaller shrubs like wild plums and sumac. They will definitely accept larger full-size trees like oaks and walnuts, but they have a harder time giving those away, so they don't want as many of them. The way that I've been gauging demand for trees that I'm actually selling to customers through the nursery is just what am I getting more hits on the website, on the Facebook Marketplace postings. What is selling more? What is selling faster? And I'll just share what I've learned. Again, this is just 1 year of observation. I'm very much at the beginning of my journey with this, and trends change, and also just I have a lot more to learn. But typically, the edible things go faster in my experience so far. And of the edible things, the order is pawpaw is at the top. Pawpaw, for various reasons, is really hot right now. People can't get their hands on enough pawpaw trees, so pawpaws are definitely hot. Persimmons are definitely hot, both American and Asian. Asians are probably a little bit more popular than the American type, but the American persimmons are still highly sought after, I would say. Other edibles like wild plums and elderberries, hazelnuts are pretty popular, chestnuts. The native hard-shelled nuts like black walnuts and hickory and oak trees and these sorts of things, they're not quite as common as some of the other easier-to-process nuts like hazelnut and hickory, but there's still some demand for them for sure. I won't go through every single type of tree that I grow, but you get the gist. The more edible and the more commonly recognized a tree is, the more popular it is, typically, in my experience. Within those species of trees, there's also a higher demand for improved genetics than there is for just general wild stock. So if I were to go out and get a bunch of wild pawpaw seeds and grow them, there would be a pretty high demand for them. But in my experience, if I have pawpaw seed that comes from an orchard of improved cultivars and I grow out those seedlings, there's at least slightly more demand for those improved cultivar seedlings than the just wild stock. Now, I'm not selling any grafted trees at this moment. That's a whole nother ballgame. If you're selling asexually propagated plant material, either from cuttings or from grafting, that way it's guaranteed exactly what that tree is going to produce. That definitely has a higher price tag associated with it because there's more labor. I'm not sure if there's more demand for that as opposed to seedlings. Possibly there is, but it's not something I've really gauged myself a whole lot. So anyway, those are some thoughts on basically just what I've learned trying to sell trees as a nursery over the past year or so, through the website, through Marketplace, through distributing, donating some to local groups. And hopefully this is either entertaining or helpful. Maybe you're in a similar position to me. You're just getting started out. And I know for me, the process of trying to sell trees has been a little bit overwhelming. It was pretty daunting at first. It's been rewarding to learn about it, but it was a big undertaking. I think the most important thing for me anyway has been to go slow and to try to just be honest and upfront about what I have. Another thing I've kind of grappled with is that there can be somewhat of a temptation to sell as much as possible. Once you realize that there's demand there for something and you have trees, it's hard for me sometimes to turn people down and say no. I'm actually sold out of that. I don't have any more. It can be hard. A good example of this situation is pawpaw. I had a lot of pawpaw. I sold a lot of pawpaw this year, and there was a lot of demand for it, as I've said. But I didn't want to sell pawpaws that were smaller than a certain size. It just didn't feel right. I want people that buy the trees to be happy with the tree that they buy, and I felt like if they spent money on a a tree under a certain size, they might be dissatisfied. Now, it's weird for me, right? Because, even a small tree, I've grown out these small trees before, and they're totally still viable. They might be a little bit slower to get going or need a little bit more care because they're smaller, but they'll still grow to be large trees. It's not like there's anything wrong with a small tree, but it didn't feel right for me selling the small trees. And so that's definitely a line for myself that I've had to just establish. Like, there was a point in time when I had about 40 or 50 pawpaws left, but they were all under my size requirement that I arbitrarily set for myself of what I'm willing to sell. And I had to turn a lot of people down and say, sorry, I don't have any more. I tried to be helpful to those folks and point them to other nurseries that might have pawpaws if they're looking for them now. And I made it clear, I'll have more trees this time next year if you want to come back. Another way to handle that would potentially be, selling the small trees at a heavily discounted rate with disclaimers, just letting people know this is heavily discounted because they're small. This is ideal for someone who's worked with trees before, knows what they're doing, knows that they can take care of and propagate small trees. Knowing where to set pricing is difficult too. I want to value my labor and get paid a reasonable amount for the trees, but I also want them to be affordable, and I'm young in this whole enterprise, and so I still have a lot to learn. I just find myself hesitating a lot when I'm setting pricing and asking myself, is this priced too high? I think ultimately, just to share my process right now, the best way that I can find to figure out how I should price a tree is look around at other nurseries and see what they're charging for similar size trees, and just, I don't want to undercut them too much. I don't want to overprice it above that point too much. But if you check enough nurseries, you'll get a rough range of what things are going for, and then you can decide based on that how you feel like your trees should be priced. So I touched on sizing trees and my, back and forth about what size of tree is appropriate for me to distribute, but there's also other factors that go into what trees are appropriate for me to distribute. And I try to be, at least right now, somewhat conservative in what trees I'm willing to distribute because I'm still, like I said, I'm relatively new to this whole thing and still learning. So if I see a tree that maybe it has a lot of different multiple leaders, it's a multi-stemmed thing, or it has really low branching. If I notice any issues with the root system, definitely if I notice any pathogens on the tree, I'm not going to sell those. And it's somewhat of a tricky balance because a lot of these trees, I am confident that I could grow it well, even if it has multiple stems, or maybe the root system got pruned a little bit too much when I was transplanting them. Maybe I nicked a big part of the root system and had to cut it off. I've worked with a lot of trees. I'm relatively new to selling them, but I've been working with trees for many years now, transplanting stuff and growing trees in small quantities. And I'm confident that a lot of trees that I would not distribute are still of good enough quality that I could grow them well. But because I never know who I'm selling them to and what their skill level is, and I want to provide folks with the best trees possible, I'm definitely trying to be conservative in what I'm willing to push to folks. It's a learning process. There's definitely a balance to be found there, and like everything else in the nursery, it's something that I'm always iterating on and trying to improve. But those are some general experiences that I felt were worth sharing about, my journey learning how to distribute trees as a nursery over the past year. Hopefully I'll be able to make some updates on this in coming years with what I've learned and what's working for me. And yeah, curious to hear feedback from any of you, how you guys go about this work, where you're at in the journey. Was this interesting or not, and all that sort of stuff. And definitely, if you've gotten trees from me and you have any feedback you want to give me, good or bad, I would love to hear it. You can do it publicly in the comments here, send me an email if you want to be private, whatever, but always happy to talk about how you feel about what you got. An ending thought real quick. When I'm going through and sorting out and grading trees, and as I mentioned, I might have some trees that are too small to distribute, or maybe they just have a structure that I don't like. There's too many, it's a multi-stemmed tree, or it's just got really weird, funky branching or something like that. As long as there's no pathogens or serious health concerns with a tree like that, that might be a good tree to put in the donate pile, because like I said, they'll still grow really well. They just might not be something that I feel right charging someone money for. But if we're talking about just donating trees for a conservation project, or for folks to just trial planting in their yard, I feel like for free stuff, there's a lot more flexibility. Now, still, I want to make sure that, when I'm donating trees, I'm donating healthy trees that have a good chance at taking off and, being successful, because ultimately the people that are planting these donated trees, we want them to be having fun and enjoying the process. We don't want to set them up for failure. But another thing you can do with these trees, and I do this sometimes, is sometimes I'll throw those types of trees in as freebies on top of an order. So somebody orders, a couple of wild plums and some hazelnuts, and I happen to have some smaller pawpaws laying around, maybe I'll throw a few small pawpaw in for free. Oftentimes I don't even tell people, I just throw them in the box, and then when they open it, they see, oh wow, there's some extra trees in here. This is something I do somewhat often. Also something I try to do with seed. Sometimes I'll throw in some extra seed, whether it's just some garden seed that I save. Maybe I'll throw in some extra tomatoes or squash seed or something, or extra tree seed. Whenever I have extra things, I generate a lot of plant material. It's fun and rewarding for me to share a lot of that material just to folks that are ordering through the nursery. It's just an avenue to get stuff out there. Whether people want them or not, I don't know. But I don't feel like it's a burden. It's not charging people for anything. If they don't want them, they can give them to their friends. And I know that I've ordered a lot of seed and trees from websites throughout my time, and whenever I get free stuff in the box, I'm always excited. Even if it's something that I wouldn't otherwise want to grow, I'm always just touched to get free seed, free plant material. And just to be clear, so that I'm setting honest expectations, this is not something that I make sure to do on every single order. I try to be fair. If I have some plant material to give away, I try to be consistent and give it to all of the orders that I'm doing in that specific batch, so it's not just one or two here and there. But it's not something that I'm always able to do for every single order. Anyway, it's been really encouraging, this whole journey so far, distributing trees to folks, and there's a lot of momentum, and I'm just really excited to see how it grows this season. And I want to be clear, I'm really thankful to you guys. I wouldn't be here without viewers and customers and folks who support the nursery in all number of ways, so thank you guys.